Okay, thank you, Simon. We had some small slideshow before we began from the end to the beginning of this presentation. But hello again to all food safety friends, and thank you for logging into this presentation. And also thank you, IFS for this great opportunity, giving all of us place to share and to learn. And of course, special thank to you, Simon, for being our host for these great webinars. Practically, you all know me from previous webinars since I started presenting for IFS from 2015, and till now we have talked about the topics of emergency preparedness, about traceability of food in restaurants and fast foods, also interesting topics like safe food with healthy food, and in the previous period, one of the most tracked topics was defining of SMART goals in food safety. As you all notice, I'm an auditor. I'm mainly focused on food safety standards like ISO 22000, HACCP, FSSC, etc. Also, I'm a certified trainer for these standards and topics that comes out from their demands. And from 2014, I am employed in certification body Quality Austria, and from them practically I'm an auditor and a trainer, you can see that the last time I'm also a lecturer associate for the sanitary engineering in a higher medical school. Regarding the Quality Austria, it was founded as a limited company for training, certification, and evaluation in 2004, and it has close relationship with some partner organization like IQNet or AFQM that enables some mutual exchange of topical and global know-how. It has 50 partner and member organizations, own offices, and exclusive partners. And Quality Austria is also represented on site in Eastern and Southeastern and South Europe, Asia, as well as in South and Central America. Quality Austria Center is a regional partner located in Belgrade in Serbia, and it is responsible practically for countries like Croatia, Montenegro, Bulgaria, Bosnia and Herzegovina, etc. Quality Austria covers the 3 business areas of certification, evaluation, and validation, provides training and individual certification as well as information, expert knowledge, and service. It has more than 1,000 auditors, trainers, and assessors, and technical experts that combine know-how specific to standards and sectors with a significant focus on some practical issues. Before we start, I would like to ask you some questions, and Simon already set up some pool. So we set up, and Simon, if you can just read the answers.
Does your food safety team review flow diagrams at least once per year? Yes or no, quite simply. So make your choice, and then we'll see how the bars settle.
Yeah, this is important for us because from these results we will know how to focus on our next slides on presentation.
Well, I can tell you that around 85% do review their flow diagrams at least once per year.
Okay.
Okay,
that's perfect. So there are many changes in company or organization that happens in 1 year. So think about the audit, for example. After the same, you will have some action plan and measures to do. Some of them will require changes. And also, what about investments in the infrastructure or the equipment in the year? This will also affect some changes in production process, maybe. Also, development of new products, even implementation of new steps in process. This is a big change. All of these have effects by introducing new possibility for hazards in each step. Here, you as a responsible person or leader of food safety team need to think about the change and how this change affects your food safety system. But let's not stop there. Don't just think about changes in organization. What about coming changes in standards, new demands in regulative, new demands of the market? This will also affect your food safety system. Today, we are going to talk about how you can improve your system by starting from the base, and this base are practically the flow diagrams. But before improvement, we must consider some steps and principles of our HACCP system that is basic of each food safety system and standard. So I will try not to be boring for you and show you on some interesting way the steps and principles of HACCP. It will be really short, and after that we will focus on how to create flowcharts and improve them, and how to verify these flowcharts, and how standards are requiring you to do all of these things. So first steps practically is to define the HACCP team, and here also to consider that this team must be multidisciplinary team, that you should define the team leader, that you should carry out the necessary training of the team. This training can be practically the training that is performed externally for your team, or maybe some trainings that can go through the webinars, like the webinars that are offered in IFS QN. You can also train your employees or team members internally. For all of this, you will have to have some written decisions and to communicate the internal team composition to the company. The second step, when you define the HACCP team, practically the second step is the product description. So this team and the first job will be to see what products are you producing, and practically to describe these products. For the description of these products, you will have to write down the characteristics of the end product, the preparation, some physical, chemical, sensory characteristics, packaging, also expiration date, transport and storage conditions, product name or some specification, norm, etc. The next step is intended use of products. This is the third step, and practically here you have to decide, or you have to see for what purposes your product will be used. How will the product be used? Is it ready for use, or it will be further processed? Also, what are the target groups of your consumers? Is it maybe of children or diabetics or some specific groups of people? And also you have to think about possibility of misuse of the product. This means that you have to consider everything about your product, and at the end of this step you will have like clear recipes, you will have like clear specifications of products, and from this you can start creating the next step, and this is to create a flowchart. For your flowchart, as it is said in HACCP, you have to show all relevant steps in the production process. You have to show specific steps such as packaging, reprocessing, or input of external process. And also you have to document your flowchart. This is very interesting, this fourth step, for the whole of your HACCP team, just to participate and to put every step according to the specification, how you will produce this product, and to consider all steps that are used in this production. Practically, the fifth step is verification of flowchart. You have to confirm the flow diagram in the production process at the location. How you will confirm? Practically, you will carry out a flowchart check, like walking along the production line. Also, you can carry out as many changes as is necessary for the diagram to be complete. Don't think that you will finish with the diagrams at the first time. You sit down with your HACCP team, write down the verification, and you say, okay, this is the perfect flowchart. The flowchart, when you walk through the practically production, you will see that some steps are not presented detailedly, that some steps are forgotten, etc. And this is why today we are going to talk about flowcharts and the improvements of these flowcharts. After you define the flowchart, we start with the first principle, but sixth step, it is to identify and analyze hazards. You can only do it practically when you have all steps mentioned in your flowchart. And here, identification of potential hazards from the outside environment, from the product itself during the process. Also, there are 3 types of hazards. You already know it. Now we are also speaking about some 4 types of hazards and different hazards that are intentional. Today it is mandatory to evaluate the 4th type in relation to the presence of allergens, for example. After you evaluate all the hazards and identify each step where this specific hazard can happen, there is a next principle, and this is to determine the critical control points. Here you will assess the hazards for each step in the flowchart. You will define the controls. If there is a risk potential, use the decision tree when defining the CCP points, this is very, very important. When you determine the CCPs, you can present them in a flowchart, and we will talk about it later. And you can continue to third principle, this is establishing critical limits. So they must be defined for each CCP, they must be measured and described in the HCC plan, and the limit can be quantitative, like for example pH or temperature or time and attribute, and it can be also attribute limit, like small bone, there are not, or shell fragments, plus or minus, or something like that. But for each CCP, you are going to have some kind of limits that can be measured. Okay, the fourth principle is to install monitoring or tracking for this CCP. Monitoring has set controls that confirm that the critical limits for the defined CCP points are within the frames. So monitoring should give faster results in order to determine deviations in time and to prevent further product damage. Also here you will define the method, you will define who, where, when, which record will be used, etc. After you install the monitoring, you will have the fifth principle or the 10 steps of the HACCP, and this is to determine corrective measures. So if the monitoring establishes that there has been a deviation, the corrective measures that have been defined are applied. By applying corrective measure, it must be verified that CCPs have been returned under the control. And this is the 10 steps. I'm sure that you already know it in your production and that you can show that your CCPs are under the control. 11th step or the sixth principle is verification of HACCP plan. How we're going to do it? How we need first to describe the verification, to control samples by a method other than monitoring, and process monitoring and testing of employees in charge of controlling CCP point is very important for the verification. Also, this can be checked by an independent auditor. Also, it can be checked by external laboratory sampling, and this is the verification of your HACCP plan, where you are going to prove that that everything works perfectly. Seventh principle or the 12th document is the document HACCP. And here you need to define procedures concerning the good hygienic practice, good management practice, also records of tracking for your defined CCP points, records of a monitoring of control points, or even operative prerequisite programs, and records of implemented corrective measures. After you finish all of these steps, you practically implemented your HACCP. Also, you have gone through all the steps, you have gone through all the principles, and you implemented your HACCP, you have documented your HACCP, verified, and that's it. But this is not the end. Practically, there is one big step that you are going to use during your production, during your work, and this is continuous review of HACCP system. What is said here, that the system must be reviewed at least one per year, and every time there's a change in the system. So here are some examples of changes in the system. Changes at the production side, or even the production side. Changes in the recipe and composition of the product. Changes to suppliers of raw materials or method of procurement, knowing about new potential dangers for products, compliance about health of consumers, information that the target group of consumers has changed. And this is only some small part of changes that will affect your food safety system, that will affect your HACCP team to review your food safety system. Okay, but from this, today we are not going to talk about review of each step about HACCP. We are going to talk merely just about review of your flow diagrams. Before we continue to review the flow diagrams, we just need to know how our food safety standards define flow diagrams requirements. So if we look at the ISO 22000, which is the main part of the FSSC 22000 version 4, we can see in point 7351 about flow diagrams, and it is said that the flow diagrams shall be prepared for the product or process categories covered by the food safety management system. Also, flow diagrams shall provide a basis for evaluation the possible occurrence, increase, or introduction of food safety hazards. Important to mention that flow diagrams must be clear, accurate, and sufficiently detailed. Remember this, sufficiently detailed flow diagrams is needed. Flow diagrams need to include the following: the sequence and interaction of all steps in the operation, any outsourced process, also where raw material ingredients and intermediate products enter the flow, also where rework and recycling take place, where end products, intermediate products, byproducts, and waste are released or removed. So in accordance with point 7.0, the food safety team shall verify the accuracy of the flow diagram by on-site checking. As I mentioned, this is the similar in HACCP, and verified flow diagrams shall be maintained as a record. So this is for your ISO 22000, but this is also for your FSSC 22000, which is a part of Global Food Safety Initiative standards. The next one is IFS Food version 6, and this is also GFSI standard, where it is said that you need to construct flow diagram. A flow diagram shall exist again for each product group, and for all variations, process and sub-process, including rework and reprocessing. Here, what is interesting is that the flow diagram shall be dated and clearly identify each CCP. So on your flow diagram, you need to point out the CCPs with the number assigned to it. In the event of any changes, the flow diagram shall be updated. Of course, we need to think about any updates, and I showed you the changes that can happen, and you need to have this update. The next thing is on-site confirmation of the flow diagram. So the HACCP team shall verify the flow diagram by on-site check, and this is important in the IFS food. Next is BRC, maybe a little bit more detailed than IFS, and here it is said how to construct a process flow diagram, or what are the requirements, and it is said that flow diagram shall be prepared to cover again each product category or process. Don't forget this, and this is very important. This shall set out all aspects of the food process operation within the HACCP scope, from raw material receipt through the processing, storage, and distribution. As a guide, this should include also the plan of premises, raw materials, sequence and interactions, potential for process delay, rework, recycling, finished products, intermediate, byproducts, etc. Also here to mention is that this flow diagram should be verified by HACCP food safety team with an on-site audit and challenge at least annually. Daily and seasonal variations shall be considered and evaluated. Also, at the end, you will have to have some records of verified flow diagrams, and they shall be maintained. So, how you can review the flow diagram? According to the steps and standard requirements, demands are listed on the left side of this slide. But during the audits, we have concluded a lot of issues in this step and even some non-conformities. In the middle of the slide, you can see that sometimes all relevant steps in the process are not listed in the flowchart, and some important steps, like, for example, cooking of the product, is not listed as a step. Sometimes there is like a mix of different steps performed in one step. Regarding the packaging or waste generation process, also it is not shown. As you can see from the requirements of the standards, it is shown that you need to present it. External processes like outsource processes are not represented by a diagram. They are not recognized by the organization. Sometimes there are some steps that are performed also in the company, but not in direct line of the flow chart. And this is some process that is beside. It can be presented by another flow chart, but they are not connected. Also, what is concluded that steps like reuse, recycling, or rework that arise in the process are not clearly presented, and sometimes we understand from the company that people does not really understand what is a rework, what is a recycling, etc. We later on some slides try to present some type of rework just to make sure how you can just point it out in your flow diagram. Also, sometimes flow diagram is overflowing, or a large number of flow charts for one process are made, and companies sometimes for one process just made 10 types of flow diagrams, trying to go in really small parts, and this is something that is confusing and not showing the very good all the process steps. Sometimes flowcharts are created with inadequate symbols. What means inadequate symbols? We are going to talk on our next slides, and I will show you some symbols that are generally let's say world recognized, and we will show some documents where you can look at the all symbols that are shown. So this is practically some of the issues that were shown during the audits, and some non-conformities. They are pretty much here shown generally, but later on practically you will see how we can deal with them, or how you can use this information to deal with them if you already have it in your production. So please don't laugh. So this is one simple flow diagram, and on many audits of small production companies, even big ones, we encounter this type of flow diagram. What is wrong with the same, you might ask? And if you are asking this, please consider the change and think about the change of your flow diagrams. You have seen what needs to be presented on the flow chart, and this one is just not what is required. So from company stance, these are the production steps, but from hazard analysis stance, this is not enough to consider everything that could happen. From standard requirement stand, this is totally not enough, and definitely you will get some non-conformities. As you can see, this flow chart, I just tried to make some simple steps in a flow chart of production of cooked ready meals, and this will be used as our model for later development and improvement. So I will try to start from these basic process steps and to show you some improvements of them according to the requirements of the standards. The first but how we can change that and where to start. And I also saw some questions. Do we need to follow specific standard for flow diagram symbols? And here is practically your answer. Let's start from some technical parts when we are going to review our flow chart. Here presented are some symbols according to DIN Catalog für Technischen Regeln, and this is DIN 66001. If you type it in a Google, you can find this document, and in this document you will find all of these symbols and explain these symbols. So you can also use ISO 5807 5807, and this is information processing, document symbols and conventions for data, program and system flow chart, program network charts, and system resource charts. And this is practically a document where you can find all of these symbols. You can also use symbols like teddy bears and flowers shaped, but then you will need to develop the procedure that describes what each symbol means, and possibly it would be interesting for the employees and auditors. I think that regulatory authorities will not laugh a lot. So good thing would be to use some of the world recognized symbols, and this is good first step in review of your flow diagrams. How in practice this looks, I will show you on your next slide. Just please pay attention on the symbols like start and end symbol, like symbol of the process, symbol of the decision, symbol for the flow, like crossing points, and etc. On the next slide, I tried to implement first these symbols, and this is our process for production of cooked ready meals, and on this part is generally explained reception, storage, and preparation. So this is the same simple flow diagram from previous slide, for production of cook-ready meals, but for this I improved one. We have used recognized symbols and add some steps that were missing. So you can see the first steps where we are going to start. This is the transport of raw and packaging materials, and we have some reception control. In this reception control, after this we will have some decision. From this decision we will decide practically, shall we go to storage of raw material or packaging material, or shall we return the product to the supplier if something is not wrong. After this, we will have some storage controls and of storage of raw materials and storage of packaging materials. In case that something is wrong in these storages and that something happens to the products, we'll again have some decision to go further, like preparation of packaging material or preparation of raw materials like cutting, slicing, or milling. But in case that something happens, with the product, we will come back to the line that is made like with a red line, and this is non-conforming product, or maybe even return to the supplier. So this is just again general. I will on the next slide again add some steps for you that are required practically by the standards, or it is just a good practice. So this is also the same slide as previous one, but as you can see, for the reception control, something is added. So requirements are clear in standards like IFS, where it is said the flow diagram shall be dated and clearly identify each CCP with the number assigned to it. In the event of any changes, the flow diagram shall be updated. Here we presented the CCPs with the numbers that will later be more detail explained in HACCP plan. For CCP1, we already have some inputs in flowchart like control and decision symbol, where in case that CCP limits are satisfied, we have storage, and in case not, the red line shows that the product is returned to supplier. Also, for our CCP2, we have similar decision steps. After the step preparation of raw materials, we have no place to continue flow diagram anymore. For example, we don't have any more sheets, we don't have any more papers, or maybe your flow diagram your flow diagram is continuing to some other steps. So we use symbol. You can see the round shape for crossing point at the bottom of the presentation slide, and mark in the same number of flow diagram that we will continue in. So this is the first diagram. This is production of cooked ready meals. And we are continuing with the crossing point to our second flow diagram, and our second flow diagram is also production of cooked ready meals, but it is covering the mixing, cooking, cooling, packaging, and storage. At the top of this flow diagram, you can see also the round shape. And on this slide, first step is practically crossing point from flow diagram 1. This is why it is mentioned number 1. From here, we are continuing the process. In this part of flow diagram, we have gone even further and showed some repeat process for step of CCP3 as a cooking control. For example, we are here doing the mixing and cooking should be done for the temperature in the middle of the product, like 73 Celsius degrees. We have here some type of cooking control with, let's say, for example, some probe thermometer. It is defined as a CCP3 in our HACCP plan. And we have decision mark. In case that this temperature is not adequate, we will repeat the process, we will continue the cooking and prolong the time, and again we will have cooking control, and if everything is okay, we will continue with the step of cooling and packaging, for example. But in cases that something is wrong, that something happened to the product, we will have, let's say, non-conforming product or waste. If we continue, for example, with the packaging controls, we will have like CCP4, because this is packaging in modified atmosphere, for example, and this is further explained in next flow diagram. This is practically the same flow diagram. I just changed some of the steps. Here, as required by the standards, I added, and you can see in the beginning of this slide, the continuous from the product's flow diagram number 1, but also here we are going to continue the flow diagram that is water preparation, and this is number 3. And why I added this, because we have some water preparation like purification, chlorination, etc. And water is added in this process of mixing and cooking. And that's why I wanted to show that here we are going to add some water from another flow diagram. And you need to consider also some hazards that are connected with the water preparation. Again, we are continuing with the cooking controls with the CCP number 3. We will have repeat process as I explained in previous slide. When we continue further, we will have some cooling and packaging, like packaging in modified atmosphere which means that you will have to have some type of gases used in the packaging. And here you will have some CCP4 and also some packaging controls. And these packaging controls will initiate practically that you are used, for example, OxyBaby to control this these gases, or maybe your package will not be very good and you will have some decision to maybe repeat the process. Or even if this is not possible and the product is damaged, like packaging, and you will have to do some rework, and you can see the blue shaped line where you just go again and you cook again your product and again cooking control, etc. And this is rework, very important to show, because you will align your hazard analysis according to this rework and think about each step here. Also, decision would be if packaging is not good, if product is damaged, then of course you will have to come back in a non-conforming product or a waste, and you cannot continue to the storage of finished products. Okay, so let's say that this is final flow diagram, which included all steps of production, reprocessing, rework, controls, pointed out CCPs, etc. We here improved it with even more information. You can see for specific steps some colored dots. Each dot means some type of documents that is used in this step and some responsible personnel for this step. So for step of reception control, we have red dot, meaning that here for control used to records is a form 023. And this is called control and reception. And responsible personnel marked with green dot is a storage worker. Again, let's repeat. For, let's say, CCP2, there are some storage controls, and you can see purple dot. Purple dot means that there is some document in use, also marked with the purple. This is FO032. This is storage temperature control record. And the green dot, again, responsible person for this is a storage worker. Also, you will hear for the preparation of raw materials. Sometimes it's a blue dot, and you can say that this blue dot is a procedure, and this is a procedure for preparation of raw materials. And responsible here is a yellow dot, and this is working in preparation area. I think when you, with your HACCP team, finish this, practically you will have a lots of information where you can base your practically your hazard analysis. You will have clear preventive actions that you already implemented, and with this you can go further. So what is the next step? Next step is a verification, and in this verification you saw in each requirement of the standard that you need to do the verification. But we, during the audits, concluded that there are some non-conformities, and these are non-conformities that the team is not familiar with the concept of verification or the verification of the flow diagram. Also, it is not clear how often flow diagrams should be implemented and reviewed. There is no clear responsibility when it comes to re-examining the flow diagrams or review, and employees are not sufficiently trained to independently review and improve the diagrams. So this is practically something that seems very hard, but in reality it is not hard, because you will have your HACCP team. You need to train your HACCP team with really good training. After this training, they are responsible to verify the flow diagram. They will verify the flow diagram during the on-site check, where they can just print out the flow diagram, carry it with themselves in the production, go through each step and just maybe change them, or just maybe improve them, etc. Come back and say, okay, this is practically our flow diagram, and it is verified. How this looks, you can see on the left side. This is on-site verification performed by the HACCP team, and this is the date when it is verified, and also the signature of the HACCP team who performed the on-site verification. And this is practically it. You have verified your practically flow diagram, and this is the ending of your flow diagram issues. I'm sure that for some flow diagrams that are showing the productions in dairy, the productions in meat industry, they are very specific, but I think that you can use all of these steps and also define the shapes of your steps to really have clear view of hazard analysis, clear view of each step and responsibilities in each step. Of course, we are coming again to the continuous review of HACCP system, and for me and practically for you, you will have the system review at least once per year, and every time there is a change, and these examples of changes in the system are changes at the production site the changes in the recipe, to suppliers of raw materials, and this is practically something that you need to do. Okay, so before we continue, please just answer some poll question, and I think that Simon already put the poll question, since we need to talk about some changes of HACCP and expectations. And yes, Simon, do we have some?
We do, yeah. I've loaded the poll in the sidebar. Do employee fluctuations affect the strength of your food safety system? So do you have a lot of turnover? Does that cause you problems with your food safety system? And I can tell you it's around 80% do have problems, have fluctuations that affect the strength of their food safety system. Yeah, so this is practically the results that is expected. And when they ask the companies about the HACCP for 2020, this is practically one of the issues that showed the problem. So we can continue, and I will go further on this. So practically for HACCP till 2020, we can say that there is a questioning the recruitment process and resource management, and 62% of organizations define finding adequate workers as the biggest challenge in the recruitment process. Also, employee fluctuations have a direct impact on cost and potentially much more on the occurrence of hazards. Also, new employees replacements make more mistakes, and it is impossible to have a strong food safety system in such conditions. Also, the growing problem of differences in generations among employees. So when was the last time that you saw a person under 25 years old to read the newspapers in paper edition? Yeah. So the largest reason for the fluctuation of employees is the lack of training, adequate assessment of competencies, and promotion. So think about your system and improvements. Some additional controls. We had some critical situations in previous years, like there are still recalls for physical hazards, allergens, pesticides, and this is in large number. Also emergency poisoning in the public that provokes panic, and also define new rules, stricter conditions for export and others. Some movement situations here is made by, for example, USDA that elaborate requirements for the validation of critical boundaries and critical operational parameters, like some Food Safety Modernization Act.
And in future, we can expect some implementation activities like stricter food safety and quality systems, some microbiological monitoring with focus on the environment, direct and indirect surfaces in contact with food products, some stricter control of allergens, also food fraud, food defense, and some stricter criteria in controlling raw material. What is again influencing the food safety system? We can say this is the influence of pathogenic microorganisms. We have some infectious disease in humans caused by pathogenic microorganisms that have increased in past 2 decades, and that data suggests that such trend will continue. The most commonly identified diseases are due to new pathogens such as norovirus or aflatoxins, chronobacter, like in food for children. And why this is happening? Because we have a lot of food trading. We have, let's say, adaptation and resistance to microorganisms, changes in food production, eating habits. We also have changes in habits of traveling, etc. What we can do is to keep up the date with informations, to perform the risk assessment and modification of existing procedures, to review our HACCP system, our flow diagrams. You have to define strict food safety control programs, and also to perform evaluation of suppliers at some higher level. Again, what affects HACCP is the development of new technologies, and this is like technologies in packaging of modified atmosphere packaging, also packages with some graphical representation of product quality, also new market demands for frozen products, frozen ready-made dishes. This is something that changes the HACCP, high pressure production in hyperbaric chamber, where food is exposed to high hydrostatic pressure that affects the destruction of microorganisms and prolongs the shelf life. This is something that is becoming more and more presented on our market. Also, the use of UV light in the destruction process of microorganisms has found its application. However, there are also some shortcomings. And this is practically all that is changing. And you can see that changes are constant. This will affect your food safety system. This will affect the HACCP demands. And I expect that till 2020, we will have some changes in HACCP, and we will have to consider also the allergens. We will have to consider the food defense, the food fraud, and this is something that is new, but we talked about it during the previous years, and we should implement it and have it in our food safety system. At the end, the one thing that remains with us is that the only constant thing is practically change. So as I mentioned on the beginning, you need to think about this change. And we came to an end. So thank you very much for listening.
Boom.
Okay. So yeah.
Yes. Brilliant. Okay. You stop sharing. Vladimir, guess what? I think they like it.
Really?
Yeah, I think they do. To be honest with you, when you see you've got more on there, but it's the way it's laid out. The different symbols meaning different things, the color coding, giving responsibilities and things. Just and then it's a really visual document that's all on one sheet that you can use as a good communication tool to help people understand. So yeah, it's very, very effective. And some people were saying that they've never seen such thing before. Look, see the comments there. They're just rolling.
That's nice.
Right. So now, with all those congratulations, I have no idea. The questions are somewhere.
Yes, I listed the questions, and maybe we can start from the, down. Some of the questions were, as I noticed, answered by the other participants because they are chatting, and this is really nice. Okay.
Right, I did see one. Do you have to have document control of HACCP? the HACCP documents? Do they have to be?
Yeah, you will need it at the end. Just the date maybe, or the version where is your HACCP active. And for example, there are some regulative requirements that you have to take care of and archive your HACCP documents for some time, like for a period of 3 years, for example, or till the end of after the end of the shelf life of your product or something like that,
Okay. What about software? Do you recommend any particular software, or do you just
No, I don't recommend it, because you have to pay it, and this is the simple thing. You just open your PowerPoint or any other document like Word or Excel, and you can find all of these practically shapes or symbols, and just make it by yourself. Trust me.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's PowerPoint. It's easier to drag and drop things about into.
Yes, but later on for printing and everything, it's a little bit harder. Maybe the best thing, if you want to put also some additional steps, like who is responsible, or you want to add which documents, etc., you can use maybe Word is the best solution.
Okay. And so I've highlighted a question there. Ayabodi Ogunkwade. Yes. How do you manage multiple process steps on your flowchart? We have so many processes.
I explain it because you will have to consider the process steps that are important steps. Like for example, maybe some of the steps you can put together in one step. Like cutting, slicing, mixing, etc. If it's practically done in one area or something, maybe you can consider that some steps of process you can put in one step box, but also you can have a big flow diagram as much as you want. Nobody can say this is a very big flow diagram, and with the use of these symbols like cross sections, you can cross some different flow diagrams and show the what is going in, what is getting out, etc.
Okay. Susan is asking, can we document a room positive pressure in a flow diagram? Or can we?
Yeah, you can put everything you want in your flow diagram. There are, how we say it, there are requirements of the standard that you need to fulfill. If you are above the standards, that's great. So you can put everything what you want in your flow diagram if it will help you to have some more detailed hazard analysis, and to see which steps are before and after this specific your step.
Okay. Suyapa, if we have a variety of 10 plus salads. Oh.
That's it. Because you know what, everyone is doing so many flow diagrams, trying to explain the same product. If you look, if you have the process of preparing the salad, like you have to wash it, for example, you have to clean it, you have to, cut it, you have to prepare some maybe sauce for it, mix it and pack it, for example, you just have these steps for each of your salad. Maybe you will have some cooking of meat or something like that. You can present it in a flow chart on the side, but I think that you can all of it present it in one flow diagram.
Yeah. Okay, just to I'm putting that comment there because that's some nice feedback. See that? You've covered a tremendous amount of information in a very short time, understandable way. I will go back and listen to this many times to digest the material as it needs to be. And I'm sure, Roy, you'll put some improvements, Roy, into your system. What else have we got? Sonam, can you please discuss about how to implement temperature mapping for storage rooms?
I think, can you please know how to implement temperature mapping for storage rooms? I'm not sure that I understand the question.
Okay, well, let's move on. Yeah, maybe Tsunami, you could ask it again.
Because I'm sorry, this is not connected with the flow diagram. So you can have temperature mapping like some different flow chart, to control the temperatures in your chambers to show it, but this is the focus now, is to have a proper flow diagram for hazard analysis.
Okay. I've highlighted another question from Neda. Is it a requirement to have the colored dot with documents in use and responsible person in the diagram? It's just a good visual idea.
It's a good visual idea and practice, Sometimes even we have flow diagrams in the middle of the document, and on your left side you can have the, let's say, the person who is responsible before each step and after each step, like we have before step of preparation, responsible person in the storage to prepare the raw material for you, and on the step of preparation you have some steps like cutting, etc., and the other person is responsible. On the left side you will have this worker, and on the right side you can separate and have this worker, and for each step you will have the responsibilities, you will have the documents needed, etc. But this is not requirement of the standard.
Okay. Let's see, another one from Charles. Is it important to indicate water for washing on your flow diagram?
For me, it is important if you are using it for washing of the, let's say, parts of the equipment that are in direct contact with the food, and especially if this water is in contact with the food.
Yeah, makes sense. Question from Elisa. Our spectrum of products is so large that we cannot do each product. We have HACCP diagrams for each process. We list the products under each process.
Yes.
What do you think? Yeah, that's what
you just consider the same process steps for groups of products. Maybe you can separate them in groups of products, and for each group of product, you just present the process steps for these groups that are specific,
Okay, Matthew, it's got Matthew thinking. He's looking at what you do and then asking about. I guess the answer to that is you can do whatever you want so long as you can describe your methodology. If it works for you, then
you can have flowers and teddy bears if you want. Small ice creams, I don't know. You can have everything you want to describe your workers or controls, or it's your company. You just explain it more detail in some procedure or instruction, When auditor comes to see what is this teddy bear,
Maybe it'll make it a bit more light-hearted. Adrian, is it better to have a simpler flowchart?
If you think that you can analyze all the hazards with a simple flowchart, then you can use it. But discuss it with the auditors on a certification.
That should be the goal, shouldn't it? Yeah. Get everything on there that makes it comprehensive enough to cover all your hazards, but then within that, try and make it as simple and visual as possible.
Yes, of course.
Yeah. Okay. What's this one from Fernanda about sushi? Can you see that one? I'll just highlight that. Quite a long one.
Is to have one flow diagram for all of but FDA required flow diagram for each type of roll being produced. What should we do? Do as FDA says.
Yeah.
So if this is, I had different clients with, let's say, similar question. They are working for some customer, for some retailer, and retailer asks from them to have a different diagram for each product, etc. And if this is demand of a customer, okay, let's do it.
Yeah. Okay. There must be some difference in the sushi rolls. There must be different hazards or some differences or something. Okay. Any more questions, or are we at the point where we've exhausted them? So, yeah. I'm very happy with today. Yeah. I'm going to give you a round of applause, Vladimir. There you go.
Thank you.
So if the audience could give you a round of applause, I'm sure they would do. Okay. I think, well, let's leave it at that. We'll send the recording and the slides afterwards, and if there are any questions, you can email. Okay.
Yes, of course.
But yeah, Vladimir. Yeah, there we go. Some claps coming through there. Right. Superb. All right, Vladimir. Look, I've enjoyed it today as always. I like working with you, and it's great. Have a good weekend. Put your feet up on the riverbank tomorrow and have a nice picnic. All right. Enjoy the sunshine. Okay. Cheers, Vladimir. Take care.
Also, bye-bye, everyone.